Right now, the flooding in Texas keeps getting worse. We'll examine the federal response and how one expert sees the damage left in its wake. Also, we'll look at why it's extremely tough right now to make a change in your job or your career. And All-Star Game fever keeps getting hotter. We'll look back at what led to Atlanta losing the Midsummer Classic 4 years ago and talk about why cities try to book these top-tier events. This is The Take. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Cheryl Preheim, filling in for my friend Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take. We go beyond the headlines and look at why and how stories are impacting your community. Experts will share what they know, and we'll have a little fun, too. Over the weekend, more flooding came to parts of rain-soaked central Texas. This is what it looked like in Kerrville, northwest of San Antonio. Ground search operations were suspended there at one point yesterday because of ongoing flood danger. Rescue teams have been searching for missing people after the central part of the state was ravaged by catastrophic flooding just a week ago. On Friday, President Trump toured some of the devastation. He praised state and local officials for their response, but there is a lot of ongoing criticism over what others say was a failure to get to people fast enough. At a roundtable, the president expressed his shock at the scale of the damage, and he pointed out the perseverance of the victims' families during such a difficult time.
I've seen a lot of bad ones. I've gone to a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tornadoes. I've never seen anything like this. This is a bad one. We just visited with incredible families that, I mean, look, they've been devastated. They lost their child or two children, and just hard to believe what, I've never seen anything like it. A little narrow river that becomes a monster.
A monster, and so many people still just don't have any answers. This morning, at least 170 people are still missing, and every hour that goes by is just torture for their loved ones. At least 132 people are confirmed to have died in the flood since the 4th of July weekend. It's being called a 1,000-year flood, but that kind of scope can be hard to comprehend. Here to offer some context for us is Dr. Herman Fritz, a professor at Georgia Tech School of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Welcome, and thanks so much for being on The Take, Dr. Fritz.
Thank you for having me.
So when you look at the tragic flooding in Texas this month, there is so much to it, and the devastation continues, as we talked about, so many people still missing this morning. But from your perspective, what stands out most?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is that the evacuations were unheeded. There were warnings for the thunderstorms that were incoming, but there was probably an issue on that last mile of communication in terms of actually evacuating people. That is one. And then the other thing that I see is that on these upper reaches that south fork of the Guadalupe River, the very upper reaches of the river, where the Camp Mystic is, there is basically no river gauge upstream. So we have no way to know exactly how much water is actually coming. You have rainfall gauges upstream on that branch, but we don't have river gauges. So there should probably have been a gauge installed upstream if we're having campers in the flood zone and the floodway. And discussions about sirens had been there. So if we have summer camps like that, then we need to have warning systems that are localized, because the weather forecast is going to be good on a larger scale, on a county level and so forth, but it's not going to be able to pinpoint that thunderstorm and how much rain is going to go exactly in which very small watershed. So that's for the upstream part. And everything downstream really is heeding the warnings, awareness, and evacuation at the right time. Everything downstream really is a last mile management and heeding the warning kind of problem.
You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking maybe from a parent's perspective, because you were talking about the summer camp right there on the river, and some people looking at FEMA maps that were actually put out a while ago that showed some of those newer cabins were parked right in a known flood area. And as you're talking about having to think about not just a response when you know it's coming, but even thinking about in advance, what would we do if something were to happen? We're talking about this being called a 1,000-year flood. Talk about what you mean by that, and it, you know, obviously it's rare, but how important is it to really plan for what could even be a tiny thought as something that could potentially happen?
Yeah, so 1,000-year flood, right? That is something that, we hear a lot these days, but there's no 1,000-year record, okay? There is no record of rainfall or of floods over 1,000 years anywhere in the United States. So basically, those are extrapolations. So typically, those might be a little bit on the high end in terms of saying it's 1,000 year. Chances are that, if you have a 1,000-year or 100-year rainfall every other year, then chances are that the record is just too short, okay? So when you extrapolate from a short record to a long record, then typically you're going to underestimate the extreme events. That's something we see, for example, for very rare events like tsunamis, where we have literally 1,000-year events. They're just not in the record. And then, you get that Fukushima event that's off the scale and causes hundreds of billions of damage. So that is there. But I think it's a flash flood alley. We knew flash floods are possible. So I think we shouldn't, maybe 1,000 years based on the current record. But, if you have a 1,000-year record, I'm very sure that that's not a 1,000-year flood.
Interesting. All right. So you've seen disasters all over the world. What are some of the common infrastructure failures that you've seen repeated over and over again in flood zones? Because the question here is, how do you stop it from happening again?
Yeah, so one of the challenges, of course, in Texas is, and in all the places around the world, actually, where you'd have, dry spells, like those rivers were literally completely dry. A couple of CFS before, and then explosion to 10,000 and even 100,000 CFS in terms of discharge. Is that people are tempted to build in the flood zone because most of the time that flood zone is dry. Okay, so it is very tempting as a developer. Oh well, this is cheap land. It's it's nice and green. It's ready to go, right? It's very tempting to build into those flood zones, and that's something that's happening worldwide. If you go to the Arabian Peninsula and so on, they're even more drier, and then they have a rainfall, right? They have very similar construction issues that they build into those flood zones. And Texas, of course, is the poster child of building into flood zones. We've seen this with Hurricane Harvey in Houston. There have been bayous that have been built out and so forth. And that is a fundamental problem, which is on a planning level, on a state, on a legislative level, and that's where essentially the first mistakes are made.
Sure.
Okay, now obviously one can say that campers should be able to camp on the water because it's recreational. That's what everybody wants. Okay. But if we are doing that in the flood zone, then we need to have ways to warn these people beyond just issuing meteorological warning for thunderstorms, because every time you get that, how often are you actually evacuating, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Herman Fritz, we really appreciate the time. These are really important questions as so many people are going through such a horrendous loss there in Texas. We appreciate your context. Thanks so much. We know a lot of people have been asking, how can they help? So our parent company, Tegna, created the Texas Flood Relief Fund to support the communities impacted by the devastating flood. Just scan the QR code that you see right here on your screen to donate. Every dollar that you give goes directly to those in need. You are watching The Take. We'll be right back. The deadly flooding in Texas has become a political hot potato for the White House. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr. Good morning, Alice. Thanks for the time.
Good morning, Cheryl.
Good to see you. We're hearing from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defending her department's response here, as well as talking about the future of FEMA. These are tense conversations, even as this recovery continues right now. Will you talk more about the political implications here?
Yeah, and it's difficult to talk about the political implications because we are talking about such incredible devastation, tragedy, heartbreak in Central Texas. But there are also, there are demands for accountability and trying to understand what happened along the way. A lot of questions about why warnings didn't go out earlier than they did. A lot of those are local issues. There have been questions about how quickly warnings went out from the National Weather Service, how quickly those transferred into alerts that really went to the people that needed them. And Homeland Security is the agency that oversees FEMA, which of course is responding here. So Kristi Noem is defending, the Secretary of Homeland Security is defending the agency's overall response, and she's sharply refuting some claims that have been circulating that a policy requiring her sign off on contracts over $100,000 caused delays. She did confirm that that policy exists. This is part of the cost-saving efforts underway in FEMA, but she said it absolutely did not cause any delays. She was on the ground in Central Texas relatively quickly and pointing to that as proof of how quickly they were acting. And as for the future of FEMA, because President Trump has said he wants to see FEMA dismantled, she says it's not about dismantling, it's about reimagining. And she said the president recognized FEMA should not exist the way that it always did. It needs to be redeployed in a new way. She pointed to the Coast Guard and other federal resources that deployed to this disaster and said that's an example of how they want to sort of rework the way that FEMA responds and not have FEMA be the only one responding.
Interesting conversation to have, like you said, as the search even continues, as they're talking about FEMA and the need for that kind of response. So we'll keep following that one. Alice, I'm curious because today President Trump is meeting with the NATO Secretary General after promising to sell weapons to NATO allies in Europe to then share with Ukraine. What more do we know about the meeting, and is this part of a maybe change of heart with Ukraine?
So President Trump has been speaking a lot more forcefully about President Putin of Russia, and his growing frustration with Putin is to the benefit of Ukraine, because for a long time he was venting frustration over Ukraine's leader, President Zelensky there. But he has repeatedly said that, you know, Putin talks nicely and they'd had a good relationship in the past, but he said he talks nicely during the day and then bombs and kills people at night. So he's clearly growing increasingly frustrated that he has not been able to persuade Putin to stop the attacks, to slow and to end this war that he promised to end really on day one of his presidency. So we know that he is open to offering more weapons. He said he's going to send sophisticated anti-missile weaponry to Ukraine. Not 100% clear if that is separate from what he's talking about of selling these weapons to NATO to then pass to Ukraine. What exactly are the sort of payment mechanisms involved here? But clearly, yes, he's open to sending more weapons there, and this meeting today will be part of that.
All right, Alice Barr in Washington. Thanks so much, Alice. Good to see you. All right, plenty more for you coming up on The Take. You're watching here on 11Alive Plus. An abandoned federal training site in South Fulton is drawing fresh frustration and action from local leaders. And now the city is demanding the Trump administration either finish a planned Job Corps campus or hand it over. Here now is South Fulton City Council member Helen Willis. Welcome to the show, Council Member Willis.
Thank you for having me, Cheryl, and thank you for taking this topic, bringing attention to this topic.
Yeah, looking forward to talk more about it with you. Curious what made you decide to take such a public and bold stand on this one?
Well, the current Job Corps facility is under construction here in the city of South Fulton. The construction halted in 2019 to a contract dispute with the Job Corps, National Job Corps. The litigation has been resolved, and when we visited the Job Corps National Office in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, what was stated to us is that construction was going to commence and the Corps of Engineers was going to take over the project. But since then, we now have found that on June 30th, the U.S. Department of Labor did a knee-jerk reaction, a lot of misinformation, and tried to eliminate the Job Corps program. And so several students that were currently enrolled at that time found themselves in a situation where they were going to face hopelessness and homelessness. A lot of the kids in the Job Corps program have aged out of the foster care system. So they look to the Job Corps for career purpose, home, shelter.
For that next step in life, for that transition.
And so, yes, for the transition. And also to get a career in order to be able to make a substantial living for themselves and take care of themselves. Where here in the city of South Fulton, replacement facility was being built for the region. There are only 2 Job Corps facilities in the state of Georgia, one in Albany, one in Brunswick. One here in Atlanta was under construction, and I said was because it has halted. And the it was moving in a positive direction. Now what we have in our community is blight. And this facility was poised to help over 500 students with a plethora of careers, a plethora of opportunity. And now what we have in our community essentially is blight, uh, which can be a crime haven, which also halts our economic development opportunity. Uh, it's, it's, it's tragic what's happening to the overall program of the National Job Corps. This is a program that supports youth workforce development. It's a free program.
You know, you were
Has
talking
been
about,
around since 1964. Serves students from the age of 16 to 24. Uh, it provides workforce development, food, shelter, healthcare, and stipends to these students while they're going through the program.
you know, it was supposed to be such a game changer for the youth, like you were talking about, and an important kind of hub in the community for young people in particular. It was a $50 million federal investment, correct? Do you have any idea how much taxpayer money has essentially been wasted here so far? Like you said, it's just sitting empty. We saw a video of just fences around it. So nothing's happening on the property, but more importantly, nothing's happening to invest in these young people in the community.
Well, anybody who pays federal taxes, these are our tax dollars. At the height, our Job Corps program throughout the nation, there are 99 facilities throughout the nation. And at the height, there is a 66% graduation rate. Now, like everything else, COVID has impacted that. But what's essentially happening, since then, the National Job Corps Association has filed suit with the Department of Labor. And this particular program is allowed to continue until the lawsuit is resolved, but it's still a lot of uncertainty around it. They're not allowing at this time for students to continue to be enrolled. They're in Georgia alone. We have over 1,000 students waiting to be placed.
Wow.
Between the two facilities, and so the enrollment now at its peak, the capacity is about 45,000 nationwide. Right now, the enrollment is around 11,000. So although Job Corps is being allowed to continue, it has capacity to serve more students. And because of the U.S. Department of Labor restrictions, they are not allowed to enroll more students. And so the other thing that I don't understand is, what are they going to do with all of these facilities if they get rid of the program? Where are they going to place? What's the placement strategy for all of the students, if they get rid of the program? Where are the kids going to go?
Yeah, like you said, 1,000 kids kind of in limbo here. And Councilmember Willis, I'm so sorry that we're out of time, because this is something we want to dig more into. So hopefully we can talk to you at length about it again, but really important issue. And we want to make sure that the kids get what they need, and appreciate you coming on to talk to us about it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, talk to you again soon. Plenty more in store for you. This is The Take you're watching here on 11Alive Plus. There it is, Truist Park looking great. We're a little more than 24 hours until first pitch for Major League Baseball's All-Star Game. Tuesday's game will mark the third time the Midsummer Classic will be played in Metro Atlanta. It's estimated that Metro Atlanta, specifically Cobb County, will be reaping in anywhere from $100 to $125 million for hosting the game. But what's the more likely return on investment that we'll be able to see? Time to welcome in, as we do every Monday, financial expert Andrew Poulos. Glad to see you, Andrew. How you doing?
Good morning, Cheryl. How are you?
I'm doing great. What an exciting week in the city here. Let's start with the big picture. How do you actually measure some ROI, return on investment, for a city hosting something like this?
Yeah, I think we've got to look at the local impact, the immediate impact, which is Friday to Tuesday, right? It's a 5-day event. So we got the MLB All-Star Game, but we also have the festivities that go on before and after, which is great because it draws large crowds. We're expecting probably somewhere between 60 to 70,000 is the estimate of visitors that come into town. but we also have to look at the long-term benefits of sporting events like the All-Star Game and the NCAA Final Four and other events, right? Is that it allows our city leaders, our elected officials, to be able to go out and pitch our state to large corporations that can come in, set up shop here effectively, and create jobs.
60, 70,000 visitors spending money in the city, which is always a good thing, and everyone else from around the country maybe watching on TV, which is always good exposure. But with tomorrow's game, are you expecting that investment to mostly stay in Cobb County, or is some of that money trickling maybe into Fulton County, other parts of the metro?
Yeah, I think it'll probably trickle out a little bit. Most of it will stay within Cobb County. You just got to figure as visitors, most people want to stay close to the event center, wherever that is. But you're going to have always the crowds and the people that want to venture out and go see other spots, whether it's downtown, the attractions that we have down in the city, or elsewhere, pretty much. But yeah, it's great, and you got 60 to 70,000. That's a lot of people, right? So you also have to consider that the more people start venturing out, the more traffic will create and congestion over the weekend, which is also one of the things we have to consider. But you know, ultimately, it's great for the city. It's great for the state.
You know, the locals are thinking traffic first thing, but then the organizer was like, hey, don't forget about the hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact. So when they say that, what should viewers know about what's really behind those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I said, the economic impact is huge. We're talking about 100 to 125, maybe upwards north of that, as far as $125 million for 5 days into the city. But again, I always like events like this because it allows us to pitch our state, right, to make ourselves more marketable in a sense. Our elected officials can make us more marketable, and it just create a bigger, longer impact as far as an economic boom with trying to make our state be a situation where more people want to come and live here, more developers want to come and create developments, more corporations want to come and be here in Atlanta because we're a thriving state, we're a thriving city, and we have economic boom that everyone is attracted to.
You know, the term that we full is not true. We're not full at all. We're still growing like crazy. And Atlanta's no stranger for big events like this. Moving forward, we're going to see the World Cup, a men's Final Four. You mentioned some of the big events just a few minutes ago. At the Super Bowl coming back here as well. What advice would you give local officials or business owners trying to get ready for the financial opportunity that all of those things bring?
Yeah, I think, look, as city officials, you got to start early, the planning, the logistics and whatnot. And of course, always, we don't want to be dismissive with the security concerns, right? So when you have large venues like that attract tens of thousands of people, you always have to consider the security and the risks that come with it, basically. So planning is key, and starting way ahead of time is important. I mean, I think MLB, I was reading that they started and tickets began to sell for all these events for the 5-day events upwards of like a year or two ago. So it's just interesting how people just, you know, kind of get prepared. It's once a year event, so to speak, right? And everyone who's a diehard MLB fan wants to attend. So, you know, the city has to get ready like years ahead.
No doubt. Exciting week here for the All-Star Game and a lot more ahead. Andrew, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
All right, it is All-Star Week. You're watching The Take, and we'll be right back. This first ever showcase at Truist Park was originally set for 2021, but that All-Star Game was pulled over objections to changes made to the state's voting laws. Here to offer some context, Emory political science professor Andra Gillespie. Great to see you, Andra. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, for those who don't know, walk us through the laws and the debates over them. You and I had a lot of conversations about this in 2021.
Yes, so in 2021, the Georgia General Assembly passed and Governor Kemp signed SB 202 into law, which made changes to the election system. And in particular, there was a lot of controversy about some of the provisions of the bills. It took away having drop boxes outside of facilities. It standardized when early voting times would be around the state. It prohibited outside groups, one from donating to counties to help facilitate the election process, and from being able to provide food and water to people who were standing in long lines. It also created provisions that if a voting precinct had exceptionally long lines, that they were going to have to revisit and kind of revamp their election structure for the next cycle. A lot of these things were criticized by voting rights critics as an attempt to try to depress voter turnout, particularly among communities of color. And in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and corporate efforts to try to make sure that they were standing on what they perceived to be the right side of history, Major League Baseball decided to pull out of Georgia as, as a protest. This was also something that was certainly being pushed by voting rights advocates in the state, like people like Stacey Abrams and others.
Those advocates saying, why would you try to make it harder for anyone to vote? But as you said, particularly in communities of color. And at that time, then President Joe Biden backed pulling the game from here, calling the voting change law Jim Crow on steroids. Can you draw any parallels between that move in 2021 and other times when sports leagues really took a political stand?
Well, we have seen individual athletes make stands, and sometimes we have seen teams come together to make stances. So we could think about sort of when Black Lives Matter started to emerge in the mid-teens. Colin Kaepernick, who was then the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, started kneeling in protest during the singing of the national anthem at events. You could look at the Atlanta Dream. During the 2020 election cycle, Kelly Loeffler, who was the senator at the time, who was running for election, she'd been appointed to replace Johnny Isakson. She was a part owner of the team, and her players, wore T-shirts that said "Vote Warnock," in protest to, what they believed her political stances were to be. We've seen evidence of sports and politics mixing together. And if we think about sort of what the moment of that post-2020 moment was, Major League Baseball's response to the passage of SB 202 certainly fit this perception at the time that corporate organizations needed to be responsive to social needs. And in particular, they were trying to be responsive to younger consumers who they thought would want their organizations to make these types of statements. And they were concerned that if they didn't make these types of statements, then there would be a backlash and that you would have younger people not spending, not, taking advantage of their services.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All the examples you brought up are great, that intersection there between sports and politics. But how rare was baseball's move against Georgia? Pretty rare, though.
Could you repeat that question?
Just how rare was baseball's move to pull the game out of Georgia?
So I am not a sports historian. It certainly seemed like, a move that would have been highly unusual at the time. And I think if you want to think about it, SB 202 is still in the books. We've still had an opportunity to be able to see, what the impact of that law is going to be. But basically, at this point in history, we've seen 30 states that have adopted changes to their election systems that the Brennan Center, a voting rights organization, would actually argue as being restrictive. If Major League Baseball was to use that as their litmus test to decide where the All-Star game was going to go, that's going to rule out more than half of all baseball parks and baseball clubs in the United States. So, you could go to the West Coast, you could go to Illinois, you could go to Minnesota, but there are lots of places where there are Major League Baseball teams where you wouldn't have those teams be able to host the All-Star game. And so I think that that's actually part of the decision to, not make this an issue during this cycle. And also we're in a very different political moment where we see the Trump administration not just, challenging, schools and law firms, but they're also, sending notices to corporate entities about their DEI practices. And, rightly or wrongly, DEI and voting rights have now kind of, become linked in this larger discussion. And so, I could see Major League Baseball deciding that they're going to stay out of it and let the games happen where they're going to happen.
All right, Andra Gillespie, always appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
Plenty more for you coming up on The Take here on 11Alive Plus. Shakeup continues, this time against Mexico and the European Union. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market site in New York. Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Cheryl. Great to be here.
So 30% against these trading partners. What led up to this big move over the weekend?
Let's break it down, Cheryl. The steep tariff has left the European Union scrambling. President Trump over the weekend saying the U.S. will hit Mexico and the EU with 30% tariffs. Now, they're set to take effect on August 1st. Trump said if the EU or Mexico retaliates, would say their own higher tariffs, then the U.S. would simply tack on 30% to that figure. Collectively, the EU sells more to the U.S. than any single country, according to government figures. And combined, Mexico and the EU make up roughly 1/3 1/3 of all U.S. imports. Now, Cheryl, tomorrow we'll get a look at whether or not tariffs have driven up prices. A key inflation report, the Consumer Price Index, that's due out. It's going to show if tariffs drove up prices in June. Cheryl.
All right, I think the average consumer says everything I see at the grocery store costs me more money. The salsa, though, could soon cost more than the entree. Talk about a price hike on tomatoes.
Okay, pizza. As you mentioned, salsa and a host of other dishes using tomatoes. The price of tomatoes could start rising as early as today. The U.S. has withdrawn from a long-standing price agreement with Mexico. That's cleared the way for a nearly 21% tariff on most Mexican tomato imports. The tariffs could mean higher prices for tomatoes at grocery stores as well as restaurants. Dropping the price agreement with Mexico was seen as a way to protect domestic growers from the dumping of low-priced tomatoes into the U.S. market. Field-grown tomatoes cost U.S. shoppers about $1.70 a pound as of May of 2025, according to government data. As for how much prices may rise, well, a professor at Arizona State University predicts about a 10% jump, and he sees tomato demand possibly falling by 5%, Cheryl, as a result of that new tariff.
All right, well, sticking with what's for dinner, we have a major split here now between companies known mainly for ketchup and mac and cheese.
Just a decade after merging, Kraft Heinz is planning to break up. According to the Wall Street Journal, it would be a dramatic reversal from that 2015 deal that merged Kraft and Heinz into what was supposed to be a U.S. packaged food giant. But consumers have been shifting to fresher, less processed foods, and sales at the company have been sluggish. Kraft Heinz stock is down 60% since the deal. The Journal says a breakup could include a spinoff of a large part of the company's grocery business, including Kraft products, into a new entity. And that would leave a company with items like Heinz ketchup, along with sauces and spreads, and even the Dijon mustard brand Grey Poupon. The Journal says the split could be finalized in the coming weeks. Now, Cheryl, the secret ingredient in my delicious Italian meatballs is a touch of Grey Poupon.
Oh, really? Okay, that sounds really nice. We keep it too simple in my house. I need to spice it up a little bit. All right, I hate to talk about one more thing that's going to get more.
I will share.
You will share me. Okay, thanks. All right, I was going to say, I hate to talk about something else that might be more expensive, but Forever stamps also going up a little bit now. Break down the latest price hike that we're seeing from the Postal Service.
Cheryl, this is why you got to buy the Forever stamp. A lot of it, stock up. The cost of postage stamps went up yesterday. It cost 78 cents for a first-class Forever stamp. That's an increase of 5 cents. It's a 7.4% price hike from the Postal Service. Says it's needed, though, as it tries to sort of achieve financial stability. Now, postal rates have steadily increased in recent years. Stamp prices, they're up 46% since early 2019, when a stamp cost 50 cents. And overall, this is the 20th stamp rate change since 2000. The price for letters traveling internationally as well as postcards also went up yesterday. You can expect additional rate increases as well. The Postal Service outlined a plan last September calling for twice yearly increases, one in January, one in July, both for 2026 and 2027. Real quick, Cheryl, I sent 2 sweaters to the Philippines through USPS International about three weeks ago. It took like 12 days to get there, and it cost $79.
$79 for 2 sweaters. That's incredible in 2 weeks. All right. This is why we're texting our Christmas greetings more and more, not sending the cards in the mail. I kind of miss getting things in the mail.
We got 100. I think, Cheryl, we got like 160 days left till Christmas. I got a plan now.
Oh, gosh. All right. Thanks a lot, Maribel. 160 days and counting. All right. Plenty more for you coming up. This is The Take on 11Alive Plus. It feels like temperature for a lot of people today, over 100 degrees, plenty of hot weather with us lately. We're not the only ones heading outside. Despite it, a tiny but dangerous threat is on the move. We're talking about ticks. Here now is Dr. Nancy Hinkle, a professor of entomology at UGA's College of Agricultural Environmental Sciences. Welcome to The Take. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, this is a conversation my youngest, who's going to be a 4th grader, always says, Mom, he points to every freckle he has and says, is this a tick? Do a tick check, because his teachers have talked to him about this. When people think of dangerous bugs in Georgia, a lot of people think about mosquitoes right off the bat. In fact, there's a confirmed case of mosquitoes with West Nile and South Fulton right now, so we want to be careful when it comes to mosquitoes. But why should ticks be getting just as much attention, especially now?
Well, we are abundantly blessed with ticks. We have 23 different species of ticks in Georgia, so there's always one lurking out there ready to find you. Unfortunately, in Georgia, ticks are active year-round. So even though we think about this time of year when we're out and about and enjoying Georgia's outdoors, the perfect time to acquire ticks may be any time of the year, unfortunately. And ticks do transmit disease agents. They suck your blood, and in so doing can exchange with your blood some of the things that they are carrying. And these can be pathogens that carry a variety of different diseases.
You know, I think that's a very nice way that you're saying abundantly blessed with 23 species of ticks. I look at the video of these guys and blessed is not the word we think of, right? But it is so important. You talked about the diseases that these can carry, especially if they are in your skin for a long period of time. It's really important if you notice one to find it quickly and remove it as fast as you can, right? Time is of the essence to protect yourself.
That's exactly the trick. Yes, doing a daily tick check. You pretty much started the interview with the conclusion of the interview. Do a tick check daily. If you've been anywhere where there's a possibility there could be a tick, do a tick check. Now, ticks are very small. You've probably seen them, so you can appreciate this is the size of a tick. This is an unfed tick. Now, once they've had a blood meal, of course, they get much larger. Their little tummy fills up and they look large. If you've seen one on your dog, I hope you've never seen one on yourself that's this large, but that's what a tick looks like after it's had its blood meal.
Wow.
So get them off before you reach that point. And that's why it's important to do a daily tick check. Do it on yourself and do it on your kids. If you want to, you can have a very close friend or a beloved one assist you with this project, but it needs to be done daily. If you get the tick off within 24 hours, it vastly reduces the chance of any transmission of the disease.
All right, 24 hours is the key. And the quicker you get them out, the easier it is to get rid of those little guys. Ugh, it just kind of makes me cringe a little bit. I did find one on my daughter once, and we had to get it out of there quick. Totally freaked her out, but she's fine. How much has the tick population in Metro Atlanta maybe changed in the last decade? And is it something folks are underestimating maybe in their own backyards?
I think just about anywhere in Georgia, yes, you can find ticks, even in the metropolitan area. There are enough areas that are still reasonably wild and they have wildlife. And anytime there are animals moving through, they can potentially drop a few ticks and leave them for you to find. So we need to be alert even in the parks and the recreational areas in the metropolitan area of Atlanta and other large cities. And I would recommend, I know this sounds nerdy, but if you're going to be out in an area that is potentially tick-filled, consider wearing long pants, light-colored, khaki or white, and tuck the bottom of your pants into your socks. I know it sounds nerdy. It is, but it will prevent ticks from getting onto your skin. As long as ticks are crawling on your pants, that's fine. That's what we want them to do. You can find them and you can destroy them before they get to your skin. But if they're crawling up your bare legs and getting up under your shorts, that's what we want to avoid. So wear long pants and tuck them into your socks. And also you can consider using a product like the one shown here. There are many of them. The main trick is to know that they contain permethrin, and these can be applied to your clothing, only to your clothing, not to your skin. If you want to treat your skin as well, then use a product that has DEET in it. And there's a variety of them. We all know OFF, that contains DEET, but there are a variety of other products out there that contain DEET as well. So DEET for the skin, permethrin for your gear and clothing.
Okay, good to know. Hey, not nerdy, just wise. Think of it as wise, because you showed us those ticks, and it's worth tucking our pants into our socks. No doubt about that. And it's a 2-for-1, right? That DEET, because that's good for the mosquitoes, and we just talked about that West Nile as well. What's one myth that you wish you could debunk about ticks or tick-borne diseases right now?
There are a variety of tick-borne diseases, but they all pretty much have the same symptomatology. You develop a fever, body aches, headache, and that is such a generalized description. It could be just about any disease, so it has to be diagnosed by a physician. If you have a history of tick exposure, for instance, if you've been bitten by a tick in the last 6 weeks, that would probably be something to raise with your physician. Hey, I have been bitten by a tick in the last 6 weeks. do you think I have a tick-borne disease? And in that case, there might be a reason for a blood test, and that would then confirm what particular disease you were carrying. Now remember, the vast majority of ticks in Georgia do not carry pathogens. You don't have to worry about disease organisms. But let's just assume that they do, because we don't want any ticks sucking our blood. Get them off, remove them before they have a chance to suck your blood.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So how is UGA working with local agencies to track and maybe map ticks in Metro Atlanta? And what are some of the hot spots specifically that you may be watching?
I think anywhere where there is wildlife. And in Georgia, we've got white-tailed deer just about everywhere. So if you have seen a deer in the area, presume that there's a likelihood that ticks are in the area. Now, certainly some habitats are more facilitated for ticks, and they like those areas, and you're going to have higher numbers of ticks. But again, just about any place with trees and grass likely has a population of ticks, even though it may be low.
All right, well, here we are in the city of the trees, which is why we're talking about it, abundantly blessed with ticks, and appreciate you giving us abundant information so we can keep them off of our skin. Dr. Nancy Hinkle, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you. Keep doing those tick checks.
I promise I will, and I just feel a little like something going up my spine just because we're talking about it. Plenty more for you coming up on The Take. Thanks for watching here on 11Alive Plus. We'll be right back. My final take. Sometimes my kids would find a little rock in the backyard, be convinced it was worth something, maybe had a little sparkle to it. Well, how about a rock worth $2 to $4 million? That is the price tag on a 54-pound hunk of Mars, yes, actual Mars, about to hit the auction block at Sotheby's. This isn't just any space souvenir. It's the largest known Martian meteorite on Earth, big enough to make geologists geek out and billionaires bid like it's a Picasso. This is the largest Martian meteorite ever found on Earth. It flew 140 million miles before crash landing in the Sahara. It's made of volcanic Martian magma, cooled very slowly. About 400 Martian meteorites have ever been found on Earth, which is why it is so valuable. It could land in someone's living room for a price tag, again, of $2 to $4 million. Also up for grabs, a dinosaur skeleton. But you know, we'd rather talk about the Martian meteorite. Thanks so much for being with us here on The Take. We hope you have a great day.